At 55 years old, I was on my knees in a gas station bathroom, scrubbing dried vomit off cracked tile with bleach strong enough to sting my eyes, when the man in the $3,000 suit walked in. I remember the way his polished shoes looked out of place against that filthy floor. The smell of disinfectant and despair hung in the air. My rubber gloves dripped with dirty water as I looked up. "Are you Roderick Fulton?" he asked, his voice echoing off the grimy walls. For a moment I thought he was with the health department, or worse, corporate. I nodded, still kneeling, and that's when he handed me an envelope that would change everything. Inside that envelope was the reason my uncle left me. $340 million. And the truth my father had buried for 40 years. My name is Roderick Fulton, and until that Tuesday morning I was nobody. A failed warehouse supervisor. A divorced man whose wife had left him for his wealthy cousin. A minimum-wage janitor at a Texaco station off Highway 65. When Melody walked out, she'd said, "You'll die cleaning toilets." She was half right. I was cleaning toilets, but I wasn't dead yet. The man in the suit stood there, crisp and composed, like someone who'd taken a wrong turn and ended up in hell by accident. "Harrison Blackwell," he said, extending a manicured hand I didn't bother to shake. "Attorney with Blackwell, Trent & Associates, Houston." He kept glancing at his gold watch, impatient, like his time was worth more than mine. Which, to be fair, it probably was. Lawyers like him didn't come to places like this unless someone was getting sued or sent to prison. But what he said next made the room spin. "Your uncle, Cornelius Fulton, passed away 2 weeks ago." The name hit me like a memory I didn't know I had. Uncle Cornelius, the man my father never spoke about. The one who'd supposedly left the family decades ago to chase oil money in Texas. I'd met him twice in my life, and both times he'd been cold, distant, like a ghost that hadn't decided whether it wanted to haunt you or not. Blackwell pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. "You're the sole beneficiary of his estate," he said. 3 oil refineries, numerous wells, real estate holdings, and investments totaling approximately $340 million. The toilet brush slipped from my hand and clattered against the porcelain. $340 million. The words didn't sound real. They bounced around my skull like ping-pong balls, impossible to hold on to. I sat down hard on the closed toilet seat, bleach soaking through my khakis, and stared up at him. "There's also this," he said, pulling out a yellowed envelope with my name written in shaky cursive. "Your uncle insisted you read it alone after learning about the inheritance. His exact words were, 'Tell Roderick the truth I've carried for 40 years is in this letter.' His father's lies were really love in disguise. Love in disguise. That line hit harder than the millions ever could. My father, Wallace Fulton, was 78 years old, wasting away in a nursing home that smelled like antiseptic and broken promises. He'd never talked about his brother, never even hinted that there was something worth hiding. What lies? What truth had my uncle been carrying all these years? I could hear the buzzing fluorescent light overhead flickering as if it were listening too. Somewhere down the hallway, my boss Trevor was shouting at a customer about expired coupons. In a minute, he'd probably come, storming in to yell at me for taking too long cleaning the bathrooms. He had no idea that the man he'd been, bossing around for 2 years, had just become worth more than the entire town. But the truth is, it wasn't the money making my chest tighten. It was that letter. "Mr. Fulton," Blackwell said sharply, breaking my thoughts, "I have a car waiting outside. There are documents to sign, properties to review, executives to meet. Your life as you know it is over." I looked down into the bucket of filthy water. My reflection stared back. Gray stubble, tired eyes, a man worn down by disappointment. Melody had been right about one thing. The version of me she left behind was about to die, but not in a gas station bathroom. I stood up, peeled off my gloves, and tossed them into the bucket. The mop, the bleach, the years of humiliation, I left them all behind as I followed Harrison Blackwell out into the cold January air. Trevor came running out, shouting something about abandoning my shift. I didn't even turn around. I had an uncle to bury, a fortune to claim, and a father's lies to finally understand. The sky was sharp and blue that morning, the kind of winter sunlight that makes everything feel too bright, too real. I slid into the back seat of the black Lincoln Town Car and stared at the gas station shrinking in the side mirror. That was the last time I'd ever see it. But before I tell you what came next, you need to know how far I'd fallen to end up there in the first place. Because 3 years earlier, my life looked completely different. Back then, I was Roderick Fulton, warehouse supervisor at Midwest Distribution. $58,000 a year, decent benefits, respectable. I had a 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs of Indianapolis, a wife of 28 years, and a routine that felt, at the time, like stability. We'd been high school sweethearts, Melody and I, married young, made all the same stupid promises young love makes, and for a while, we believed them. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Every Sunday, I'd visit my father when his health allowed. He'd sit on the porch wearing that old Detroit Tigers cap he'd had since the 80s, and we'd talk about the Tigers, about life, about how hard work always paid off. He never mentioned his brother, not once. I thought I had it all figured out. Then, one Thursday afternoon in March, an email popped into my inbox. Subject: Restructuring notice. Corporate speak for you're finished. They called it right-sizing. Offered me 2 weeks of severance pay for every year of service. Sounded generous until you realize that at 52, with a bad back and no degree, no one was lining up to hire a warehouse guy. The kids I'd trained, kids who called me Mr. F, could do the job for half my salary. And they had something I didn't: computer skills and youth. The first month, I was optimistic. I updated my resume, applied to everything that looked remotely possible. I told Melody, something will turn up. It didn't. By month 3, the savings were bleeding out faster than I could stop them. Mortgage, car payments, insurance, groceries. Life doesn't pause just because you've been laid off. By month 5, I was applying to anything. Entry-level, part-time, whatever kept the lights on. Every rejection email sounded the same. We've decided to go in a different direction. Translation: we found someone younger and cheaper. Then came Dexter, my cousin. Successful Dexter, the man who'd made it big. Perfect teeth, perfect suits, perfect life. He owned car dealerships across Indiana, drove a Mercedes, and wore a Rolex just subtle enough to remind you he had one. He'd show up uninvited with expensive wine and fake concern. "Just checking on my favorite cousin," he'd say, flashing that salesman's grin. Melody lit up when he visited. Put on her good dress, wore lipstick, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I tried not to see it, but you always see it. "Dexter's just trying to help," she'd say when I complained. "Maybe he could get you a job at one of his dealerships." I didn't want his charity. But pride doesn't pay bills. So one night, over bourbon and shame, I asked him for a job. He laughed, clapped me on the shoulder. "Roderick, buddy, you're not really salesman material. You've got to have that killer instinct." I wanted to punch him, but all I did was nod. By month 8, the house was in foreclosure. And that same week, Melody started working late, coming home smelling like someone else's cologne, carrying shopping bags from stores we couldn't afford. When I confronted her, she didn't even bother denying it. "Look at yourself," she said. "You've given up. Dexter treats me like I deserve to be treated." She moved in with him a week later. The divorce papers came fast. She got half of nothing. The last thing she said to me was, "You'll die cleaning toilets. That's all you're good for." And 2 years later, there I was, on my knees, scrubbing a gas station floor, proving her right. 4 a.m. shifts, $9.50 an hour. Cleaning bathrooms that looked like crime scenes. Mopping up other people's filth. Listening to truckers grunt instead of say, "Thank you." Trevor, my boss, 28, business degree, fresh out of community college, thought he was the next Steve Jobs. He loved reminding me that I was replaceable, that I was lucky to have any job at my age. and I believed him. Until that morning. Until the lawyer with the gold watch and the letter that smelled like dust and secrets. Because that letter, still sealed, still heavy in my pocket, held the truth my father had buried, and I could feel it even then. This wasn't just about money. This was about blood. As the Lincoln pulled out onto Highway 65, the gas station shrank into a dot behind me. The world outside the window was gray and empty, the kind of Midwestern winter that makes everything look dead. But inside me, something was waking up. I didn't know it yet. But that letter would take me back through 40 years of deception, love disguised as betrayal, and a family secret powerful enough to destroy everything I thought I knew about who I was. The kind of truth that doesn't just change a man, it rewrites him. And when I finally opened that letter, nothing would ever be the same again. Because some inheritances don't come from money. They come from sin. And mine was worth $340 million. But the real cost, I was about to find out. 500 square feet. That's all I had to my name. A studio apartment above Wong's Chinese kitchen, where the walls smelled like soy sauce, the carpet smelled like old beer, and the windows refused to shut all the way. Every night, the sound of frying oil and the hiss of woks came through the vents like a lullaby for the forgotten. My wardrobe? 5 Texaco gas station uniforms and 2 pairs of jeans. My only luxury was the fact that the smell of beef and broccoli eventually numbed my nose enough to forget how broke I was. Every Sunday, my father would call from his nursing home. I'd sit by the window, staring at the flickering neon sign below, pretending that my life wasn't collapsing around me. He'd ask how things were going, and I'd lie, say work was fine, say Melody was doing well, say I was fine. Because what else could I do? Tell him the truth? Tell him that his only son had become everything he'd worked his entire life to save me from. That was my life. That was who I was. Oh, nobody. A cautionary tale about middle-aged failure, a man who'd stopped living and started surviving. And that's exactly who I was the morning Harrison Blackwell walked into that bathroom and changed everything. It started like any other Tuesday. The morning shift, a bucket of bleach water, and a pumice stone scraping away at something on the floor that made me question humanity's basic decency. The smell of ammonia burned my throat. My knees ached from years of labor that led nowhere. Then I heard it. The sound of shoes. Not work boots, not sneakers. Dress shoes. Expensive ones. You learn to recognize footsteps when you work at a gas station. Boots meant truckers. Sneakers meant teenagers about to steal something. But expensive shoes, that meant one of 2 things. Either someone was lost, or someone was about to complain. Roderick Fulton? I turned around, and there he was. A man who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a law firm commercial. Silver hair that probably cost $200 to maintain. A face untouched by exhaustion. Teeth that had never met a coffee stain. And a suit, God, that suit, that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. He looked wrong, standing in that filthy gas station bathroom, like a wolf in a chicken coop. "That's me," I said, pulling off my gloves, trying to sound less pathetic than I felt. "My name is Harrison Blackwell," he said. "Blackwell, Sterling and Associates, Houston, Texas. I need to speak with you about your uncle, Cornelius Fulton." The name hit me like cold water. Uncle Cornelius. The ghost of family rumors. The name that had existed only in fragments of conversation my father quickly shut down. I'd asked once, years ago, about him. My father's only answer. That man chose money over blood. That was the end of it. Until now. "He passed away 2 weeks ago," Blackwell continued. His voice was polished, professional but not unkind. "You're named in his will." I almost laughed. It bubbled up, shaky, uncertain, then died before it reached my lips. "Mr. Blackwell, there must be some mistake," I said. "I clean gas station bathrooms for a living. My uncle and I weren't close. I met him maybe twice. Whatever he left me, it can't be much." Blackwell didn't flinch. He set his briefcase down on the counter, clicked it open with practiced precision, and pulled out a folder thick with legal documents. "Mr. Fulton," he said, adjusting his glasses, "your uncle owned Fulton Energy Corporation, 3 oil refineries in Texas, numerous active wells throughout the Gulf region, real estate holdings in Houston and Dallas, and a diverse investment portfolio. The total estate is valued at approximately," he looked up from the papers, $340 million. The pumice stone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the tile. The sound echoed off the walls like a judge's gavel announcing a verdict. $340 million. The words didn't make sense. My legs gave out. I gripped the edge of the sink just to stay upright. "That's impossible," I said. "There must be another Roderick Fulton. Check your papers again." Blackwell smiled faintly. Not the smug kind, just the kind of smile a man gives when he knows there's no mistake. Date of birth, October 15th, 1969. Son of Wallace Fulton, retired automotive mechanic. Former resident of 44 Rue 27 Maple Street, Indianapolis. Current resident of 4111B above Wong's Chinese Kitchen. Every word hit like a hammer. This man knew more about me than most of my friends ever had. I sat down on the closed toilet seat, bleach-stained pants and all, because standing was suddenly too much. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why me? I didn't even know him." Blackwell's expression softened just enough to make me uneasy. "Your uncle followed your life quite closely, Mr. Fulton. He had reports. He knew about your job loss, your divorce, your current situation." He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out another paper. "There's also a small bequest to a Melody Fulton." I froze. "She's my ex-wife," I said. "Left me for my cousin Dexter 2 years ago." Blackwell nodded, lips tightening. "Yes, well, your uncle left her exactly $1. The note attached reads, and I quote, 'So she knows I knew exactly what kind of woman she was.'" For the first time in months, maybe years, I laughed. A real laugh. Deep and sharp, and a little broken. Even from the grave, a man I barely knew had managed to deliver the perfect insult to the woman who'd destroyed me. Blackwell allowed the moment to pass before clearing his throat. "There's one more thing," he said, reaching into the briefcase one final time. "Your uncle left this." It was an envelope. Yellowed with age, sealed with wax like something out of another century. My name was written across the front in shaky handwriting. He requested that you read it alone, after being informed of the inheritance, Blackwell said. He said it contains the truth about why he stayed away, and why your father made the choices he did. The words hung there, heavy, almost sacred. That's when Trevor stormed in. "What the hell is taking so long, Roderick?" he barked. "We've got customers complaining about the bathrooms, and you're in here having a—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the lawyer, the suit, the briefcase. "Who's this?" "My attorney," I said before I even thought about it. The words came out smooth, confident. It felt good. "I'm quitting, effective immediately." Trevor blinked, then he laughed. A loud, ugly sound that bounced around the tiled walls. "Your attorney?" "Yeah, and I'm the CEO of Microsoft. You can't just quit without notice, Fulton. It's in your contract." Before I could respond, Blackwell stepped forward, calm and composed, handing Trevor his business card like a weapon. "Actually," he said, "Mr. Fulton can leave immediately, and I'll be happy to handle any legal questions you may have about his employment contract." Trevor's face went pale. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Blackwell turned to me. "Mr. Fulton, there's a car waiting outside. A jet leaves for Houston in 2 hours. There are documents to sign and executives expecting you." I took a deep breath. peeled off my uniform shirt, dropped it onto the wet floor. "The mop's in the corner," I said. "You might want to finish that stain. It's a tough one." And then I walked out, past the rows of snacks, past the blinking lottery machine, past the faces of customers who stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but for the first time in 3 years, I didn't care. Outside, a black Lincoln Town car waited at the curb. The driver, white gloves, pressed uniform, opened the door like I was somebody important. I slid into a leather seat softer than my own mattress. Blackwell climbed in beside me, briefcase on his lap, already typing something on his phone. "We'll stop by your apartment so you can pack," he said. "The jet leaves from Indianapolis Regional at noon. I've arranged for someone to handle your lease termination and shipping." I stared out the window at the gas station shrinking behind us. "This is really happening," I whispered. Blackwell didn't look up. "Mr. Fulton, in approximately 4 hours, you'll be one of the wealthiest men in Texas." We drove in silence. When we reached my apartment, it looked even smaller than before. The walls that once held my hopeless nights now just looked pathetic. I stuffed my uniforms and jeans into trash bags, grabbed the photo of my father from the nightstand, and took the shoebox where I kept my important papers. Everything I owned, every trace of my old life, fit into 3 bags. 3 years of surviving, reduced to what I could carry to a car. The private jet was waiting. I'd never flown first class before. Hell, I'd barely flown at all. But there it was, gleaming white. A flight attendant greeted me like I was someone who mattered. She even called me Mr. Fulton, without hesitation, as if that name suddenly meant something again. We took off into a cloudless sky. Blackwell spread out stacks of documents across a mahogany table like this was just another Tuesday for him. "Your uncle's main refinery employs 400 people," he said. "The foreman, Duke Morrison, has been managing operations for a month. He's expecting you." "I don't know anything about oil refineries," I admitted. "I ran a warehouse." "This is a whole different universe." Blackwell gave a small smile. "Your uncle anticipated that. His instructions were simple. Roeder will be smart enough to listen to the people who know more than him. That's why he'll succeed where others would fail." I stared out the window at the vast Texas horizon stretching out beneath us. When we landed, the air was thick with heat and money. The drive to the refinery took an hour. Flat land, endless sky, and pump jacks moving in slow, mechanical rhythm. At the entrance, a massive steel sign read, "Fulton Energy Corporation." My name, my blood, etched into metal. My stomach flipped, and then I saw him. Duke Morrison. 6'4", built like he'd been carved from Texas rock. A mustache fit for an old Western movie. Hands that looked like they could crush a wrench or a man, without much difference. He looked me up and down as I stepped out of the car. "You're the new boss?" he asked, voice low, skeptical. I swallowed hard. "I guess I am," Duke grunted. Well, welcome to Fulton Energy, Mr. Fulton." The smell of oil and metal filled the air. The machinery roared like thunder in the distance, and somewhere, in my pocket, that yellowed envelope still waited. Sealed. Heavy. Whispering. A truth 40 years old. A truth about my father, about my uncle, and about the secret that would make $340 million feel like pocket change. I didn't know it yet, but the fortune wasn't the gift. It was the bait, and I had just taken it. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "So, you're Cornelius's nephew." His grip was like steel, his stare harder still. The kind of man who spent his whole life surrounded by fire, noise, and pressure. "No offense, Mr. Fulton," he said, "but what exactly do you know about running an oil refinery?" And right there I had a choice. Fake confidence or tell the truth. I took a breath and said, "Nothing. But I know how to learn, and I know how to listen to people who know more than me." He studied me for a second, like he was trying to see if there was any real grit behind the words. Then, finally, his mouth twitched into the smallest nod and he stuck out his hand. "Your uncle said you'd say something like, That, his handshake nearly broke my fingers. That was my first day as the heir to a $340 million empire I didn't even know existed a week ago. The refinery was something out of another world. A living, breathing machine. A city of steel and steam that never slept. The air was thick with the smell of oil and heat. Pipes twisted like veins through the landscape, and every clang of metal echoed like a heartbeat. Workers in hard hats moved with purpose, shouting over the constant hum of machinery. These weren't people you impressed with money or a fancy title. You earned their respect, one honest word at a time. Duke Morrison, the foreman, led me up a set of stairs overlooking the main processing unit. From there, I could see everything. Towers stretching toward the sky, flames flickering in the distance, trucks rolling in and out like clockwork. Your uncle built this place from nothing, Duke said, his voice low but full of pride. Started with one small refinery he bought out of bankruptcy in '82. Worked 18-hour days. Knew every pipe, every valve, every worker's name. Never married, never had kids. This was his family. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, feeling a strange weight settle in my chest. Because I'd never been part of a family that looked like this. One built from sweat, metal, and fire. That evening, Blackwell, my uncle's lawyer, drove me to what he called the house. But house wasn't the right word. Mansion wasn't either. It was an estate. 50 acres of quiet land outside Houston, with a driveway so long it could have been its own zip code. When I walked inside, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the lonely kind. Every piece of furniture was polished, every rug perfectly placed, but it felt empty, like a museum where life had once lived but moved out a long time ago. Maria, the housekeeper, met me at the door. Mr. Cornelius lived here alone, she said softly. He had staff during the day, but at night, it was just him. That hit harder than I expected. A man surrounded by wealth, power, everything most people dream of. And he'd spent 2 decades eating dinner by himself in silence. Later that night, I sat in his study. A massive room lined with books, oil industry awards, and photos of men in hard hats shaking hands under Texas sunrises. There was a globe the size of a basketball, a decanter of bourbon older than I was, and a phone sitting on the desk. I stared at it for a while before dialing. 4 rings. Then a weak voice. "Hello? Dad, it's me. Roderick. You all right, son? I need to tell you something about Uncle Cornelius." There was a pause. A long one. Then, quietly, I heard he passed. Yeah, but Dad. My throat tightened. He left me everything. The refineries, the properties, the investments. $340 million. Silence. Just breathing on the other end. "Good," my father finally said, his voice tight. "That's good, son. That's what he should have done. Dad, what happened between you two? Why didn't we ever talk to him? Why did he leave all this to me?" He sighed. A sound so heavy it carried 40 years of something unspoken. "Read his letter," he said. "He told me before he died that he'd explain everything in a letter to you. Just promise me one thing, Roderick. Whatever's in that letter, remember that I did what I thought was best for you." The line went dead. Hours later, after Maria went home and the house fell silent again, I poured a glass of bourbon and opened the envelope. It was sealed with old wax. My name was written across the front in shaky handwriting that looked like it had taken every ounce of strength to finish. The paper inside was thick, expensive, like something from another era. I unfolded it carefully. "Dear Roderick," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm dead. And you're probably wondering why I left everything to a nephew I barely knew." My hands trembled. "The truth is," it continued, "I've been watching you your entire life from a distance, because your father and I agreed it was best." The words made my stomach turn. Agreed it was best? What the hell did that mean? "What I'm about to tell you," the letter said, "will change everything you thought you knew about our family." I took a sip of bourbon and kept reading. 40 years ago, I didn't choose money over family like Wallace told you. I chose to take the blame for something, to protect him, and to protect you. I froze. Your father and I, the letter said, were both in love with the same woman. Your mother, Grace. I stopped breathing. My hand tightened around the glass. She was beautiful, smart, and could make any man feel like a king. Wallace met her first at a dance hall in Detroit. I met her 2 weeks later when he brought her to Sunday dinner. The moment I saw her, I understood why he loved her. I could almost see it. Two young brothers both falling for the same woman. One cautious, one bold. I tried to stay away, the letter continued. I moved to Houston, started working in the oil fields. But Grace started writing to me. Letters saying she'd chosen the wrong brother. Said Wallace was too safe, too predictable. She wanted adventure. She wanted me. My stomach twisted. I burned every letter he wrote. Never responded to a single one. But when I started making money, she came to Houston. Said she was leaving Wallace. Said she wanted to be with me. Said she'd bring you with her. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine my mother, the woman I'd put on a pedestal, standing in front of my uncle, begging him to run away with her. I told her no, the letter said. I told her Wallace was the better man, that he loved her, not the idea of her, but she didn't take it well. She threatened to tell Wallace that she and I had been having an affair. That lie would have destroyed him. The next words hit like a hammer, so I made a deal with her. I would come home, stage a fight with Wallace, make it look like I'd chosen money over family. In exchange, I'd pay her $5,000 a month to stay with Wallace, to keep the secret, to keep you. I stared at the paper, barely able to process it. $5,000. Every month. For 10 years, he'd paid her $600,000 to protect his brother from the truth. She took the deal, he wrote. Took it without hesitation. Wallace never knew about the money. He just thought I'd changed. Thought I'd turned into a selfish bastard chasing success. The fight we had that Thanksgiving, it was all an act. But he believed it. He needed to believe it. I set the letter down, my chest tight. The room felt smaller. I watched you grow up from afar, Roderick. Every school play, every baseball game, every graduation. I was there, in the back row where no one would notice. I watched you become a good man, a hard worker, honest and loyal just like your father. Tears blurred my vision. When your company downsized, I almost broke my promise. When you were about to lose your house, I wanted to help so badly I could barely stand it. But I couldn't. I had to let you struggle because Wallace's peace depended on the lie staying buried. I read the next line out loud. When you married Melody, I knew immediately she was just like your mother. Beautiful, charming, and hollow inside. He was right, every word of it. I wanted to warn you, but I couldn't. I had to watch as history repeated itself, as she left you for your cousin the moment your money was gone. That's when I realized I couldn't keep this secret forever. The ink got darker near the bottom of the page like his hand was pressing harder, fighting against weakness. When I was diagnosed with cancer last year, I knew it was time. I had Blackwell find you. Had Duke keep the business running. The money isn't just an inheritance, Roderick. It's 40 years of apology. For the pain, for the silence, for choosing your father's peace over your prosperity. The words blurred again as tears hit the page. The last thing you need to know, he wrote, is this: don't tell Wallace the truth. Let him remember Grace as he needs to. Some lies are kindness, son. My breath caught when I read the next line. Everything I built, every dollar earned, every success achieved, it was always meant for you, for the nephew I couldn't claim, but loved like my own son. The final words were shaky, almost unreadable. The $1 I left for Melody is petty, I know. But I'm dead, so I can afford to be petty. Let her choke on it. Use this wealth wisely. Trust Duke, take care of your father, and know that I loved you from afar every single day of your life. When the letter slipped from my hands onto the desk, the room was dead silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. 40 years of secrets, sacrifice, and love disguised as betrayal. My uncle had destroyed his own reputation to protect my father. My mother had taken money to stay in a marriage she didn't want. And my father had lived a lie he never knew existed. The sun was setting through the study windows, painting the Texas sky blood red. I sat there for hours, staring at that horizon, realizing that every choice, every mistake, had led to this moment. And as the last light faded, I couldn't shake one question that pulsed through my mind, louder than the silence surrounding me. If everything I thought I knew was a lie, then what other truths were still waiting to surface? You ever have a moment that splits your life in two? 1 second, you're just trying to make it through another day. And the next, everything you thought you knew about yourself, your family, your past, it's all gone. Rewritten. That's what happened to me. Not in a boardroom or courtroom, but in the most ordinary place you could imagine. A gas station bathroom. Yeah, that's where my old life ended. And my new one began. When people hear the story now, they call it fate, destiny, divine timing. But the truth? It didn't feel like a miracle when it happened. It felt like humiliation. The smell of disinfectant, the sting of ammonia, the sound of a mop squeaking on tile. I was broke, divorced, invisible. And that Tuesday morning, when a lawyer in an expensive suit walked into that bathroom holding an envelope, I didn't know it yet. But my entire life was about to change. That letter, that simple envelope, carried a truth that had been buried for 40 years. A truth that would explain why my life had been shaped by people who never got to say what they really felt. 3 months later, I was standing in my father's living room, holding the letter that started it all. And I asked him the question that had been burning inside me ever since. "You knew," I said when he answered the phone. "You knew about the letter." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, in that soft, tired voice I'd grown up with, he said, "Not what was in it. But Cornelius called me a week before he died. Said he'd explain everything in a letter to you. Said you'd understand why things were the way they were." I swallowed hard. "Dad, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest." There was a silence, the kind that fills a room even over the phone line. "Are you happy?" I asked, "with the memories you have of Mom?" He didn't answer right away. I could hear him breathing, slow, careful. Then finally, "She gave me you, son. Whatever else she was or wasn't. She gave me you. That's enough happiness for any man's lifetime." That broke me a little, because behind his words, I could hear what he wasn't saying. That he'd built his peace on top of secrets he never wanted to face again. "Dad," I said finally, "I'm moving you to Houston. There's a place here called Autumn Gardens. It's got real gardens, tomato plants you can tend yourself, your own apartment with a kitchen, nurses who actually care about their patients. No more sharing rooms with strangers." He sighed. "Roderick, I can't afford that kind of place." "I can," I said. Uncle Cornelius made sure I could. 3 weeks later, I moved my father to Houston. The first time he saw his new apartment, he cried. Not from sadness, but because for the first time in years, someone had given him back something he didn't even realize he'd lost. Dignity. Now he's got his tomato plants, a small patio where he sits every morning to watch the sunrise, and a nurse named Betty who bakes cookies and laughs at his terrible jokes. They play cards every Thursday, and he's happier than I've seen him in decades. Meanwhile, the news broke about my inheritance. $340 million, and that's when the phone calls started. Melody, my ex-wife, called 17 times. 17. The first few were sweet. "We could work things out," she said in one. "Remember our good times," she said in another. But by the end, they were full of anger, resentment, desperation. 2 days after she found out she'd been explicitly excluded from the will, her boyfriend, Dexter, the one she left me for, dumped her. Said being with a woman publicly insulted by a multi-million-dollar estate was bad for his image. Last I heard, she's living with her sister, working as a receptionist at a dental office in Fort Wayne. I don't wish her ill, but I don't wish her well either. Some people are just lessons dressed up as lovers. I kept the refineries, but I sold the mansion. Bought a 4-bedroom house 10 minutes from the main facility. Nothing fancy. No marble floors, no chandeliers, no maids in pressed uniforms. Just a place where you can walk around in your socks and not worry about scratching the floor. Duke, my best friend, runs the refinery operations now, and I focus on what I'm actually good at, helping people who've been knocked down get back up. That's how the Cornelius Fulton Foundation for Displaced Workers was born. We don't give speeches or hand out feel-good certificates. We give people real skills: welding, electrical work, HVAC certification, trades that pay real money. We've retrained 200 people so far. Every graduation ceremony I tell them my story, about the gas station, the bathroom, and the lawyer in the expensive suit. I tell them about the moment I thought my life was over, and how that was the exact moment it began again. They need to know that dignity can be restored, that life can surprise you, especially when you've stopped believing in surprises. Last week, I saw someone I never thought I'd see again. Trevor, my old boss from the gas station. He applied for a job at one of my refineries. Didn't recognize my name at first. Just filled out an application like everyone else. I hired him, entry level. And his supervisor? Nancy Chen, a 58-year-old woman who used to be a marketing executive until corporate downsizing wiped out her career. She went through our training program last year. Now she's teaching people half her age that respect isn't about titles. It's about seeing worth in every person you meet. Trevor's learning that. Slowly. The other day, he walked into my office and apologized. Said he was sorry for how he treated me all those years ago. I smiled and told him, "We're even. Every Sunday, I drive to Dallas for lunch with my father. We don't talk about Uncle Cornelius. We don't talk about my mother. We talk about the Cowboys' chances this season. About how his tomato plants are producing so many tomatoes he's giving them away to everyone in the facility. Sometimes Betty joins us for lunch, and honestly, it's enough. Some truths are just too heavy for old men who've earned their peace. A month ago, Duke stopped me on my way through the refinery. He said, 'You know, your uncle would have been proud. You didn't let the money change who you are.' I looked around, saw the workers heading home to their families, laughing, tired, alive, and said, 'It did change me. It just didn't corrupt me. There's a difference.' See, once a month I still clean bathrooms at our foundation's training center. Not because I have to, but because I never want to forget what it feels like to be invisible. When the men and women in the program see me, the guy who owns the place, on his knees scrubbing toilets, something clicks. They realize dignity isn't about the work you do. It's about remembering that everyone deserves respect. Because the truth about family? It's not about blood. Blood doesn't determine loyalty. Money doesn't measure worth, and love, real love, doesn't always look like affection. Sometimes it looks like absence. Uncle Cornelius taught me that. He spent 40 years building an empire not for himself but for a nephew he couldn't claim. He lived alone so my father could live with his beautiful lies. He died keeping his secret, breaking it only when it could no longer hurt anyone. I keep his letter locked away in a safety deposit box along with my divorce papers and my last pay stub from the gas station. 3 documents that tell the full story, where I was, where I am, and the bridge between them. Built by a man I never really knew. Melody once told me I'd die cleaning toilets. She was wrong. I didn't die that day. I was reborn. Right there, on that Tuesday morning, when a stranger handed me my uncle's 40-year-old apology wrapped in $340 million. Sometimes I drive past that old Texaco station. It's still there, still needing a paint job, still selling overpriced coffee to truckers. There's a new guy cleaning the bathrooms now. Middle-aged, worn down, fighting to hold on to what's left of his pride. I stopped once, walked in, handed him my card, and told him about the foundation. He looked at me like I was insane. A guy in a nice truck talking about second chances. "Why would you help me?" he asked. I smiled and said, "Because someone helped me when I needed it most." He just did it from a distance. That's the thing about blessings. They don't always come wrapped in light. Sometimes they come disguised as loss, as failure, as rock bottom. Sometimes the worst thing that could happen is the best thing that ever will. My story isn't about money. It's about redemption. About understanding that the people who love us most aren't always the ones who stand beside us. Sometimes they stand far away, building something in silence, waiting for the moment to show us that we were never as alone as we thought. And maybe that's the secret, that somewhere out there, right now, someone's building a bridge for you too. Someone you don't even know yet. Someone who's watching, waiting, and preparing the moment that changes everything. You might be one phone call away, one envelope away, one Tuesday morning away from your miracle. You just have to hold on long enough to meet it, because sometimes the letter that saves your life is already on its way,